Morning, everyone. First off, I would like to just give you a little bit of information. What I am going to present to you is the result of my dissertation just 2 weeks ago. So it's not that comprehensive, it's not that whole yet. However, I would like to present it as it was presented on my dissertation. My dissertation actually is based on the logic of identifying perception and support compliance and participation of stakeholders towards marine protected area. Okay. For those majority of you that doesn't know me, my name is Engineer Omar C. Gonzalez. This is the presentation that I had. I would like to open this presentation with a video grab from the UNDP. I hope you can hear it.
In 1950, the seas were abundant with fish, with 22% of the available stock being fished at a sustainable level, leaving 78% developing or underexploited. But over the years, that's changed. Shortly thereafter, parts of the ocean became overexploited, with fish being removed faster than they can be naturally replenished. In 1961, parts of the ocean started to collapse, never before seen in our history, and over the years, that trend continued. At last count, in 2014, only 17% of the world's fish stocks were considered developing. 16% of stocks were overfished, and 2% were collapsed. Overfishing leads to annual global economic losses of $83 billion. By 2030, global aquaculture will need to grow by at least 4% per year to meet projected demand. But there is hope. Marine protected areas support the recovery of fish stocks, often doubling or tripling spawning numbers, with tenfold increases in egg production in just 5 to 10 years.
So basically, my study was anchored on that small clip of video. Why? Because basically, more than half of the world's population relies on fishing. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on fisheries. I'm not going to say that I'm not an expert on marine protected area. What I was aiming for is trying to identify how the seafaring industry can be a part of the solution to this. So that was my research. But let me just give you a little bit of information for those of you that doesn't know what's marine protected area. Marine protected area was defined as geographical space recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal and other effective means to achieve a long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem, services, and cultural values. In 2011, Polnack and Sierra identified that throughout the world, there's a general consensus among environmentalists that there should be an increase in the amount of areas, of marine areas that should be reserved as marine protected area. Even then, noon pa naman, actually it's not in 2011, it was in 1980s, yung need for marine protected area was recognized. Just to give you a little bit of information, in 2016, more than 1 million hectares covering both coastal and offshore waters of Cagayan Silio, plus 80,000 hectares of Aborlan in the Philippine province of Palawan has been declared marine protected area. Just imagine that, more than 1 million hectares. What is the purpose of that? Because it was our goal to have a big marine protected area. In 2017, actually, the DNR Secretary Roy Matos said that the Philippines is proposing the establishment of a network of marine protected area in the ASEAN region in a bid to safeguard migratory species and habitat critical for their survival. My presentation of my defense actually was anchored on this premise. Marine protected area, marami na po yung marine protected area na nababanggit sa ibang research. Although in the maritime sector, especially on our degree, hindi siya ganun kakilala. Now, all over the world, there are about 6,500 marine protected areas. Okay, hindi masyadong maisip kung gaano kalaki yon. But, it covers about 8.761% of the entire world seas. Ganun karami yun, ganun kalaki yun. But was it enough? No, basically, it is lacking. Kulang siya sa target na 10% at least, according to the United Nations by 2020, and of at least 30% coverage by the World Park Congress. Paano naman po yung sa Pilipinas? Of the 6,500 marine protected areas in the world, about 1,800 or 25% of the world's marine protected area can be found in the Philippines. Okay ba yun, sir, na nasa atin yung 1/4? Ganun kadami yung nandito sa Pilipinas? Technically, not yet. It only covers about 1.2% of our territorial waters. Ganun siya kakonti. Okay? It is very far from the targeted 15% of the coastal municipal waters by the 1998 Fisheries Code of Legislation, and far from the targeted 10% of the coral reef area by 2020 by the Philippine Marine Sanctuary Strategy. So ganun siya kakonti. So hindi siya ganun nakaka-attain ng kanyang target. So my study was asking that, why is it that there are significant discrepancy? Bakit ganun kakonti? Or bakit hindi natin ma-achieve yung ating target with our number of marine protected areas? So, madaming mga research ang nagsasabi that, first, majority of which are paper parks. Yung iba naman nagsasabing ineffectively managed, and it lacks community support, it lacks funding and political support. My study anchored on this premise by the Foundation of Philippine Environment in 2014, which identifies that yung assessment ng marine protected area was only on biomass and diversity, or according to its size, age, and habitat. Iilan lamang yung study that is anchored on identifying one factor, social issues. So doon po ako nag-focus sa aking study with regards to the social issues accompanied in the marine protected area. Bakit po social issues? So ang dami-dami namang dahilan kung bakit hindi ganun kagaling o kaganda yung marine protected area natin. Why did I focus on social issues? Because according to Carcamo and Associates in 2014, marine protected area are linked social ecological system. That means it has to address not just the problem in the environment, but also it has to address the problem in the society in which the marine protected area is established, which is conflict, poverty, or any other social issues. My focus, my study focused on trying to identify support and acceptance of marine protected area. Dito po ako nag-focus. Just trying to identify how much is marine protected area being accepted and how much it is being supported. So ito po this is the concept of my study. So it's a bit technical and masyado po siyang mahaba when I presented it. But I was trying to identify community perception, the level of support and compliance and participation, plus the low level of MPA management effectiveness. In identifying that, I wish to increase community perception towards MPA to increase the level of support, compliance, and participation, thus moving forward for an improved program administration. So, this was my study area. 4 area in the Verde Island Passage. Number 1 was in Mabini, Batangas. Number 2 was in Puerto Galera. Number 3 is in Tingloy. And number 4 is in Verde Island itself. So, this idea of trying to study marine protected area was not actually kumbaga hindi ito yung talagang pinag-focusan ko. This was, nagilang akong, should we say, na-encourage lang ako by Dr. Alcala. Dr. Alcala is a professor in Silliman University. On my first dissertation, pumunta ako sa Dumaguete and he said that the best way for me to understand something like this is to immerse myself in the environment itself. So sinabihan niya ako, pumunta ako ng Apo Island, wherein nakilala ko rin naman yung proponent ng Marine Protected Area then in 1984, which is Mario Pascubillo. And then, sila yung nagbigay sa akin ng information with regards to Marine Protected Area. And in the need of the Marine Protected Area na ma-focus dito sa industry natin. So, this was the study area of my research. The method that I used was convergent parallel mixed method. Just for everyone's information, it's a method wherein the quantitative and the qualitative data were gathered separately and then merged together. So, it's a bit technical, so hindi ko na proceed pa. So, let me just proceed with this. The total of my respondents is 262 individuals, composed of 160 locals and 102 tourists were taken as key informants. This was actually new according to my external advisor, Dr. Arceo of the University of the Philippines. Sabi niya, this is the first time that someone is trying to understand the side of tourists in terms of marine protected area. That's why she said that, go for it. Sama mo yung mga tourists. So, of activities were given, but majority of which would only be willing to provide this money and this time for coastal cleanup and mangrove planting. In terms of compliance, the study tries to identify how compliant stakeholders are in terms of zonation, garbage disposal, the non-extraction policy, and activity regulations. The study identifies that stakeholders have high level. Mataas naman yung compliance natin sa MP regulations. However, it was noted that majority of the key informants perceived community are least compliant with garbage disposal as compared to other regulations. According to several respondents, they identified that locals especially, wala lang silang masyadong pakialam for garbage disposal, especially on the area of my research. Medyo pangit ng pakinggan ko, but that was the truth. In terms of participation, I asked respondents whether or not they would be willing to participate in information, education, and communication program. They would be willing to participate in patrolling and base and for coastal cleanup and mangrove planting. The result of the survey identifies that moderate level lamang ang participation with an average of participating in no more than one activity per month. Parang sa kanila, hanggang isang beses lang, once na lang ako sasama. Kung kailan man yun, basta once lang yun. And majority of which would just be willing to participate in, again, coastal cleanup and mangrove planting. Hanggang dun lang sila. Ayaw na nilang gumawa ng iba pang activity. And correlating the perception to support compliance and participation, I was shocked when this came back as the result. I was hoping that if the perception of an individual increases, the support, the compliance, and the participation would also increase. But rather, the results identify quite differently. The result of my study identifies that when a person's perception increases, the time as support and participation decreases. Kapag gumaganda ang paningin ng tao sa marine protected area o sa marine environment, they are more likely not to support it in volunteering. Hindi sila masyadong willing na mag-participate na sa mga activities. And the result of my study identifies that karamihan po sa mga Pilipino, hindi naman sa lahat, are very timid. Ayaw nilang mag-participate because they feel that, ay maganda na, okay na yan eh. They don't need my skill set anymore. So they don't need my time anymore because it's already effective. However, if the perception increases, their financial support and compliance would increase. if they perceive marine protected area as effectively being managed, they will be willing to pay more. This was actually observed doon po sa Puerto Galera. Sa Puerto Galera, they have a very good financial support in terms of marine protected area activities. So in trying to identify the results of my study, so this is the result of identifying the perception. There are variation in the awareness of the presence of marine protected area. This was found to be the major contributing factor on stakeholders' perception towards MPA. Karamihan ho ng mga turista, okay, because it was moderate aware lang, karamihan kasi ng mga turista would only have a second-hand knowledge of the presence of MPAs. Saan mo makikita yung mga information na yon? They received it from TV shows, posters, tourism promotions, internet posts, or blogs. Actually, majority of my respondents in Verde Island, they only learned about marine protected area in the island, including the locals, they only learned about it in Biyahe ni Drew. They also learned it in Kapuso mo, Jessica Soho. So hanggang dun lang yung knowledge nila. They don't have that much, that deep information about marine protected area. That's why this was the result. Low level of awareness ng mga locals. These respondents demonstrate rather shallow understanding of MPA, resulting in key informants believing MPA to produce disadvantage towards the community and little benefit to the community. Karamihan ng mga respondents that are, should we say, moderately aware of the presence of marine protected area, they believe that marine protected area doesn't have that much benefit to them. Para sa kanila, hanggang dun lang yon. Okay? Like for example, the best example that I have here was in Mabini. In Mabini, locals are moderately aware of the presence of MPA, resulting in low agreement to MPA regulations. The result of my study identifies that because locals are moderately aware of the presence of MPA, they're moderately aware of the information associated with marine protected area, they have low agreement. Majority of which ayaw nilang sumunod doon sa patakaran. Why? Because they do not have that much information about marine protected area. This is actually in comparison with Puerto Galera. In Puerto Galera, napakataas po ng perception nila, and so they have a very good agreement with MPA regulation. In terms of support, medyo namali lang po yan. Anyways, in terms of support, key informants are willing to spend both time and money for coastal cleanup and mangrove planting. Karamihan ng mga respondents ko when I asked, what activity would you like to participate or to support in marine protected areas? Parati na lang silang sinasabi, coastal cleanup. Hanggang dun lang. For example, in Puerto Galera and Tingloy, when the mayor asks for volunteers, hindi po maabot ng isang oras. Ando na agad yung mga volunteers nila. That's how high their participation is. Ganun yung support nila. In measuring naman the compliance of stakeholders, it was found out that tourists, ito yung kakaiba rito, tourists have lower level of compliance towards some MPA regulations. Karamihan ho ng stakeholders na encounter ko is, majority of which walang pakialam sa garbage disposal. When I ask why, yung mga locals hindi rin naman sumusunod eh. They view that since the locals are not following MPA regulations, why would they? So that's the result of this study in terms of compliance. Like for example, in Tingloy, some tourists are doubtful of the garbage disposal regulation enforcement, believing that locals to be freely throwing garbage anywhere, causing them to hesitate in abiding by such regulations. Merong fine na nakalagay doon, 500 pesos. First offense. Yung mga tourists ayaw din naman sumunod doon. Bakit? Kasi daming basura na nakikita nila eh. So that was the result of my study. In terms of participation, the last variable in my study, public participation is one of the crucial factors contributing to success of management effort. It was noted that Tingloy but somewhat lacking in Mabini. It is noted that locals are rather reluctant in participating in MPA activities due to somewhat feeling discriminated. So inungkat ko po yung dahilan kung bakit hindi masyado nagpa-participate ng locals sa Mabini. It was found out that even then, with establishment of Marine Protected Area in Mabini, yung mga locals so hindi pinapayagang pumasok sa Marine Protected Area. But tourists are allowed for recreational purposes, which includes spearfishing. Pero yung mga locals, hindi pwede kahit mga wilang. So the locals felt that somewhat, ay nadi-discriminate kami. Wag na natin pansin yung MPA because discriminated din lang naman tayo. So when fishermen, so it was found out that when fishermen are involved in management through formal and informal participation in rulemaking on MPA management boards, it can lead to perceived legitimacy. Yun po yung nakita namin doon sa Puerto Galera. Stakeholders are involved, therefore they are more participative on the activity. So just fast forward for the discussion. The results of my study identifies that different stakeholders have varying perceptions towards MPA. It was found out that tourists have lower perception than local towards MPAs, but are more willing to support and participate in MPA activities. They have almost 3 times the number of monetary value and time support for MPA activities. And locals have lower perceptions than tourists but are more willing to comply with MPA regulations. Stakeholders are more likely to participate and support MPAs in need over those with sufficient funding and support, and stakeholder compliance towards MPA regulations are dependent on the perceived legitimacy of regulations and governing body. So as part of my recommendation, actually mahaba po yung recommendations ko na to. It was about 5 or 6 pages. I just want to identify that more emphasis should be placed on effectiveness of MPA programs for key stakeholders by increasing awareness and analyzing the need to involve stakeholders. Governments and conservation agencies need to devise innovative ways and means to attract support, compliance, and participation. So yung karamihan ng recommendations ko is for governing bodies. But what about us? Ano po yung pwede nating gawin bilang suporta sa Marine Protected Area? Personally, I would like to recommend that we should have an active participation. Swerte po tayo that AIMS is highly active in participating in MPA activities. Meron pong social activism. It's a means of identifying how much we support Greenpeace, Clean Air Act, etc. Coastal cleanup. Marami pong ginagawang coastal cleanup ang AIMS. And if ever meron po dito katulad ko ng mga divers, I encourage you to join Scuba Sorero. Yan, kami po ay nag-scuba diving, and whilst we are conducting our scuba diving, maglinis ka na rin ng dagat. So, as part of my recommendation, madami pong coastal cleanup activities. I was invited by my friend from Cebu and also friend from Cavite to join this one. And also, I encourage you to join us in Scuba Sorero. Ito po ay kasama po ako. Doon po kami sa Bicol. We are conducting scuba and cleaning up of the environment. So, that's the result of my studies. I would like to thank you, and if there is any question, I would welcome questions. Okay, later na po, thank you. So again, my name is Dr. Omar C. Gonzalez. Ako nga po pala ay MEMA, sorry. Nabaliktad lang po. Ano po yung MEMA? MEMA sabi lamang. Now, I'm the first to have the PhD in Maritime Education and Maritime Administration. Okay ba? So thank you very much again, and good morning.